At Axiom, our mission is to elevate the sales profession by transforming buyer-seller interactions and helping salespeople become trusted advisors to everyone they meet. Our mindful selling methodology has helped dozens of companies and thousands of salespeople achieve greater performance and more joy than they ever thought possible. And because we know salespeople don't become proficient with new skills by attending training events, we've developed the Kinetics Sales Effectiveness Platform. Kinetics is a purpose-built combination of tools, online learning content, and insights designed to activate the Axiom methodology in your business. Kinetics takes learning out of the classroom and embeds it into your sales operation. Using real opportunities, accounts, and metrics, Kinetics helps your team identify growth opportunities and then delivers learning at the point of need. With Kinetics, people don't leave work to train, they get more skilled while they work. Learning is deeper, more efficient, and easier to apply, leading to greater impact at a lower cost. If you want to see if mindful selling and the Kinetics platform are right for you, you can learn more by visiting us today at axiomsaleskinetics.com or scanning the QR code on your screen. Hello, and welcome to today's Training Industry Leader Talk, Transforming Sales Performance Through Training, sponsored by Axiom Sales Kinetics, Domino, Imparta, Litmos, the Brooks Group, and Whatfix. I'm Dee Caraglino, your event producer and host today. Before we dive into our final session, I would like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items to help you interact with our speaker and get the most out of the session. Throughout the event, please feel free to interact with us in the chat window and submit questions in the Q&A window. I'll be monitoring your comments and saving your questions for Q&A toward the end of the session. Closed captions are enabled for this event. You can turn those on or off by locating the closed caption icon in your toolbar. I encourage you to share the information you received today on social media. We will be engaging in the Twitter/X conversation throughout the event, so please feel free to join in there. At the end of your time with us, you'll see a short survey in your browser, and we'd appreciate your thoughts on today's event. Lastly, all of our sessions are being recorded and will be archived on trainingindustry.com. You'll receive a follow-up email from us with a link to the on-demand sessions. If this is your first Training Industry event, we'd like to welcome you. Training Industry exists to make connections among learning and development professionals. We offer many resources to support your role in L&D, including conferences and live events like today's Leader Talk, as well as through articles on our website, our magazine, research reports, and our podcast. Make Training Industry your go-to resource for learning solutions and visit us at trainingindustry.com to learn more. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Bob Sanders, a reformed sales training company CEO and managing partner of Axiom Sales Kinetics. Bob has more than 30 years of experience helping organizations such as AT&T, Verizon Wireless, Thrive, and CommScope achieve exceptional sales results. Prior to acquiring Axiom with his business partners in May of 2022, Bob was the Chief Operating Officer of Reflect Systems, where he helped implement a variety of sales, marketing, and operational initiatives that doubled recurring revenue and positioned the company to be acquired by Creative Realities. And he's just a really knowledgeable guy.
It sounds so much better when you say it.
Welcome back, Bob.
Thank you, Dee. It's a pleasure to be here. And welcome everybody to our final session of the day. I hope that you have gotten as much out of the earlier sessions as did I. I found them really informative, and I want to start by making a minor correction to the title of today's session, because I think the original title I may have written, "Don't waste your money on sales training, period. Do these things instead," and that really isn't the intent. The intent is don't waste your money on sales training until you do the things that we're going to talk about here today first. So I think there's been a ton of great stuff shared so far today, and we have lots of stuff to cover during today's session. So I want to stress that the objective actually is to help make certain that you maximize the ROI for the training investment that you do make. So I'm not suggesting we shouldn't do it. What I am going to suggest as we go through today's session is that there are some steps that, if we will take them before we actually launch our program, can have tremendous impact on the value that it brings to the organization. And so that's really what we're going to talk about. In order to accomplish that, we've got 6 items on the agenda. I will be talking, I am highly caffeinated right now, by the way. I think I've had like 5 cups of coffee today. So this will be played at 1.5 rate speed. You can slow it down, I think, in the playback version. But we got 6 items. We're going to talk about the 2 primary drivers for return on investment in sales training, because when we stay focused on impacting those things, we will automatically drive a higher return on investment. That discussion is going to lead to the second topic, which we're going to talk about in terms of skills transformations. How do we actually get people doing things differently? Those 2 will set the stage. From there, we're going to get into what are the 4 steps we could take before launching a training initiative that will help ensure its success. Then we'll talk about what causes initiatives to fail to launch. And it's not so much that we don't get them going, but they stall out. So we'll talk about what makes that happen, what we can do to avoid it, talk about some next steps you can take in your organizations when you leave here today. And then finally, we'll save some time for Q&A. And in the Q&A, we'll actually have a slide up that'll have 4 resources that we're also going to give you today. So there'll be QR codes that will enable you to download some resources that will help you as you continue forward on your journey. Now, in order to make the most of our time, it's really helpful if I get to know a little bit about you as an audience, where you are in your sales training journey. So we've got 3, almost held up 4 fingers, but we only have 3 poll questions. Dee, if you'll kick off the first one here, we'll give everybody a chance to answer the 3 poll questions. And Dee, I guess when we get to 70% or so completion here, we can go to the next one. First one, what role do you play in the organization? Are you in learning development, HR, sales training, sales enablement? Are you in sales leadership? And that would include frontline sales managers or other. Dee, since you can see the completion, thank you. I'll let you decide when. All right, so we've got the 47% are in sales training. The vast majority are in sales training and sales enablement and L&D, which is great. I will shape the conversation accordingly. Excellent. Let's go to the next poll question, which is going to be about your past sales training initiatives. When you think about the most recent training initiative, did it exceed your targeted ROI? Did it meet it? Did you miss it? Not sure or didn't have one? And if you haven't implemented one in the past, that's okay too. So we'll give everybody a chance to answer that while I drink more coffee. Alexandra, I've been on with you today, so I know you have to do every single thing in your organization. I'm not sure you're not the only person in the entire company who isn't a sales rep. All right, Dee, when you're ready, we'll go to the answers here. So not sure, didn't have an ROI. All right, not bad. Hey, good news is 22% of you actually either met or exceeded your return on investment. That's actually higher than I would have anticipated. So that's good news. Great job there. And for the rest of you, hopefully by the end of our session today, you'll have some very specific things that you can do to help ensure that your next initiative meets or exceeds the return on investment. And then last question is, drum roll. All right, who has an initiative and what do you have planned over the next 18 months? Sales skills, methodology, product training, new tools or process training, all of the above, something else or nothing planned? And the answers are, all right, all of the above. Wow. So for those of you that are the only people in your organization doing this and have multiple initiatives planned, I do sympathize. That's a real challenge. So again, hopefully we can help frame things up for you today that will equip you to make certain that as you move forward in this journey, you're taking steps to help ensure that the things that you do really deliver maximum value to the business. And we'll actually start that conversation with our first agenda item, which is what are the 2 ROI drivers? And this has always been really interesting to me. A friend and client of ours, Dan Bixby, who runs training at Bobcat, they make the backhoes and the equipment, wrote a book a while back on product training for product experts. And one of the things that Dan's always talked about is training exists to affect some kind of a change in behavior. And it's a good frame of reference to keep in mind as we talk about the two ROI drivers. And Dee mentioned this at the outset today. I am a reformed sales training executive. So you heard about our mission to elevate the sales profession, but what we did, our journey, and my journey, frankly, has been really interesting in that we built a methodology for interacting with buyers that, it turns out, allowed salespeople to experience really crazy success and not only sell significantly more, but feel really good about the work they did. They helped people make better buying decisions. And as a result, they experienced a lot of success. And we delivered that in the traditional way. Classroom training events that typically lasted between 2 days and 2 weeks. And that was great. People loved the training. We did that for 20 years. People loved the training, said great things about it. And the people who used what they learned in the training got these great results. And we were selling a lot of training. Unfortunately, as you heard at the outset, our mission, our purpose is to elevate the profession. And so we went back to see, well, what percentage are actually using it and how good are they getting? And in fact, part of that was brought on by the book that you see, and this is going to be the first of two specific reading recommendations for you if you've got training initiatives. This book is called Telling Training Story by Dr. Robert Brinkerhoff. And I was introduced to this book in 2010 by, at the time, our largest client. They were training 8,000 salespeople. And as we were evaluating the impact of the program, they hired Dr. Brinkerhoff to implement the success case method and study the impact of the program. We, in turn, hired Western Michigan University, where he had been a professor, to do the same success case method study across a broad spectrum of clients. And the reason we did it, frankly, was because we were experiencing the same things that other sales training companies have experienced for decades. 80 to 90% of the people who went to the training weren't actually using it. And for us, while that didn't hurt to sell sales training because they loved the training, said great things about it, it was really problematic for us in that it wasn't allowing us to fulfill our purpose. And so these success case method studies really helped us to identify the underlying reasons behind people not using the training that they were attending. And it turned out there were a couple of specific things. One, the reinforcement was inadequate. And by inadequate, doesn't mean it wasn't available, but it wasn't where they needed it, okay? The coaching was ineffective. In fact, you saw some things earlier provided in the Imparta session, which I really enjoyed. I thought that Richard and Michelle did an amazing job about why people don't adopt methodology. I've seen this elsewhere in other studies too. Managers not reinforcing it, managers not coaching to it is one of the most commonly cited reasons for not adopting the sales methodology. So that happened. It wasn't integrated into other systems. People didn't see it. And then it was often perceived as the flavor of the month. Now, understanding why only 20% were using it was one thing, but what we really needed to figure out is where can we take this and how? How do we move from that to something significantly higher? And that's really important because that's ultimately what drives the impact of our sales training programs. It's all about adoption and proficiency. So on the x-axis, I have adoption, but notice it says observable adoption. So that is, what's the percentage of people who are actually using the skills that they were taught? On the y-axis here, we have proficiency, but again, it's observable proficiency. How effectively are they doing it? And the reason it's observable is because one of the things that you learn with the success case method is that surveys, self-assessments are notoriously unreliable. And if you think about it, that kind of makes sense. If you've launched a sales training program and you've spent tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe millions in some organizations on this program, leadership has to be behind it. And leadership is probably making it clear they want a return on that investment. So what happens is you launch this program, everybody goes through it, and then we send out a survey and ask them if they're using it. There is a clear right answer. And the right answer is, oh yeah, I'm absolutely using it. And so the success case method weeds out these false positives. And when you weed out the false positives, here's what we find. What we really get when we make a sales training investment is about 20% of the people adopting it, using the methodology, becoming proficient with the skills that are taught. We can increase that to 30 to 40% if we provide the right kind of reinforcement, make it readily accessible. So things like online learning that is really micro learning, not 60 minutes or 45 minutes or 30 minutes long, but much, much shorter. That helps making it available to them, accessible. But here's the thing, if we really want to maximize impact, we've got to get way further out on the adoption and proficiency scale. And it is possible to do that. But it's not reinforcement, it's not training events, it's a full-on skills transformation that makes that happen. And here's the thing, if we can affect an actual skills transformation, and this, by the way, applies to both your product learning and your sales training, if those things need to be complementary, because if I know the product really well, but I don't know how to engage with the customer, I don't know how to shape their criteria so they favor our product, I don't know how to present it in a compelling way so it demonstrates impact that's meaningful to them, then my product knowledge is useless. But if I have all those skills and I don't know the product, that's the same thing. So when we talk about a skills transformation, it means the ability to leverage skills like qualifying, presenting, negotiating, and our product knowledge and our market intelligence in a way that drives better results. And here's the thing, if we affect a skills transformation, we can get 4 times the adoption of traditional sales training. And it is absolutely possible. In fact, one of those success case method studies on our clients done by Western Michigan University actually demonstrated close to 80% adoption of the skills and the methodology. So what I want to talk about next is what that actually means. What is a skills transformation? How do we achieve it? And so it is possible to achieve this thing called skills transformation. Our sales training initiatives can be transformative, but it's important that from the very outset, we think about them a little bit differently. We don't think about them as events we need to deliver, programs we need to implement. We need to think about them in terms of what is the change that we need to affect? How do people actually get good? How do they adopt and become proficient with new skills? And I think from my perspective, and you heard a little bit about this earlier again in the session, it's really helpful to think about this in terms of 2 different audiences, if you will. Individuals. How do individuals actually develop skills? And then what does an organization have to do in order to make that happen? Okay, so we'll start with individuals. And in fact, neuroscience, there was a great question about the difference earlier in the Q&A period about the difference between neuroscience and psychology. So neuroscientists have given us really useful models for how people develop skills. And when I say develop skills, it's develop new skill or increment in any significant way on an existing skill. It's not just you either have a skill or you don't. There are degrees of proficiency. So I can swing a golf club, but I can't do it anywhere near as well as a professional golfer. But I can incrementally improve the way I swing a golf club. And here's the thing. Neuroscientists tell us that we go through this cycle. We learn the skill or the next iteration of the skill. We then practice the skill. Then we apply the skill in an actual real environment and we evaluate, or with help of a coach, have an evaluation done. And then we learn how we did in the next increment. Now, the key thing here is what neuroscience has told us is each of these major iterations or new skills requires an actual sleep cycle. Something amazing happens in our brains when we go to sleep at night and we start rearranging information. We put things into long-term memory. We actually store what we've learned in muscle memory about the skills, right? So that's necessary. Now, what that means is if you're doing a 2-day training class, there's only one sleep cycle in it. So people can only get good at one thing. If you're doing 2 weeks, maybe you can get them good at a few things. Sales training programs, when they were first implemented as a standard part of what businesses did, they were a year long. People could get good at 50 things. They could just get good at 1 a week. But that's not the way they are anymore. And so what happens is we're implementing programs in a way where people can't get good at it. Well, here's what we figured out. The people who were getting good were all doing the same thing when they got back. When they left training, so it wasn't, by the way, and this was good news, bad news story in our success case method study. The difference between high adopters, which is what success case looks at, the difference between high adopters and low adopters, the difference had nothing to do with the instructor, the content, the time or day of the training, the location of the training, or even the audience themselves. It had everything to do with what happened after the training. High adopters came back and they were self-disciplined enough to begin a continuous learning cycle. And they would break it down into small pieces. We gave them a plan. We gave every single one of the people. There are tens of thousands of them. We gave every one of them a plan. But the people who were able to proactively manage that on their own, they began to learn continuously. They practiced consistently, whether it was with their coach or with another person on the team. They measured their own proficiency. They actually checked to see against the ideal how good they were doing on a regular basis, and they almost all leveraged coaches. And so if we want to affect a skills transformation, and we think about what that means more people doing this. What we actually have to do isn't just teach them what the best practices or the ideal behaviors look like, or the necessary skills and knowledge. We don't just have to impart that. We don't just have to make it available. We have to help the other 80%, the ones that won't do it on their own, develop some new habits. If you haven't seen this book or The Power of Habit by James Cleary, I highly recommend one or both of them. It gets into a really rich discussion about how people develop habits and how they change behavior. And understanding that if you are a learning and development person, if you're a sales enablement professional, it's really useful to understand how change happens and how habits are formed, because you begin to build into your programs the kinds of things that help to facilitate and accelerate that. So in Duhigg's book, he actually talks about something called keystone habits. Keystone habits are small changes that make a big difference. And so the keystone habits for a salesperson are learning continuously, practicing consistently, measuring their proficiency against a model, and leveraging a coach. Now, I actually heard something earlier that made me a little nervous. In one of the sessions, somebody said, well, role playing is not right for everybody. I also, though, was very encouraged by what I saw some of you put in the chat, which is, yeah, call it something different then. You cannot get better at any skill if you don't practice the skill. And practicing isn't doing it in front of customers for money. Practicing is what we do with one another. It's what we do in front of a coach who can give us useful feedback. So when you think about affecting a skills transformation, it's important that we equip people to learn continuously, practice consistently. It has to be something we just adopt as an organization as standard operating procedure. We measure proficiency, we measure learning, we measure coaching, and we leverage coaching. Now, it's also helpful, I said, to think about that organizationally. And this is a pretty simple, basic change model. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but here's the way organizations affect change. We get people to believe that the change is necessary, that the change is right. Then we ask them to make a commitment to changing. We need them to make a commitment to making the change individually and as a team. Then we start to see the behaviors put into practice. And when we see them, what do we want to do in a change cycle? Reward the living daylights out of them. Recognize that they've changed. And so how do we make that happen as the organization? What do we do in enablement and learning and development and leadership? Well, we provide them training, but we don't provide them training that just teaches them what to do. We provide them training that gets them bought in, that gets them committed. Then we equip them with tools, with learning libraries. We also leverage coaches so that they can drive the continuous learning. And I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. And then we reward them, reward them, reward them. So this organizational change and this individual change, these transformations happen if we do 4 things first. So that's the backdrop. That's what we want to affect, is this kind of individual and organizational skills transformation. In order to do that, there are 4 things that we've got to do first. And I'm going to go through each of them one at a time. The first one is, it is absolutely essential from a skills, from a behaviors perspective, to select the right methodology first. Later, one of the resources I'll provide you is a more in-depth discussion about how to go about selecting the right methodology. But here's what happens. If we get this wrong and organizations do get it wrong, and then they have to do it over again, it can absolutely derail everything else. If it doesn't work, it will derail your initiative. It won't get adopted. And there are some common pitfalls that derail it. And what we've got on the slide is what to do instead, right? So one pitfall that derails it is it's not helpful to buyers. We heard earlier some conversation about how sales people are nervous because something like 79% of them said, in Imparta's presentation said, selling is becoming more consultative. That's because buyers don't want to be sold to. They want to be helped. They need people who can help them weed out all the distractions, all the information, and help them make the best decision for their business. If the methodology doesn't equip your people to be helpful to everybody they meet, not just the people that buy their solution, but everybody they meet, they will stop using it. And that will cause the program to derail. The next thing that causes them to derail is there are bits and pieces developed by different organizations. They're disjointed skills. They don't work well together. I will quarrel with one thing I heard earlier, which is, and I think this was Richard who may have said this, that FSU did a study and found there are no methodologies that are agile. They did not study all methodologies. So they did study a good part of them. I'm familiar with the study, but there are methodologies that are agile. But in order to be agile, you actually have to understand the methodology, and it needs to apply, and it needs to be integrated. You can't take a piece from one and a piece from another that wasn't designed to work together and think that that's going to work. So it's really important to make certain if you had a socket set and one part wasn't, the socket itself wasn't designed to work with the handle that you were using, it won't fit on there. It's not going to work together. The same is true of methodology. So don't give up. You can find methodologies that work, that are helpful, and that are fully integrated. They also have to be applicable in all scenarios. A lot of times, and I think I saw this in the chat earlier, somebody was looking for some help on methodology that would apply to a more enterprise environment. One of the interesting things that happens, and you've heard this a couple of times, people don't like to change. They don't want to do things different than they do them today. Those are the 80% that don't adopt if we just leave them to their own devices, right? So one of the reasons they'll do that is because they will find reasons for it not to apply, and then they'll apply those reasons to everything. So the same organization that said, our sales are more complex, we need a more sophisticated selling methodology. Once you teach it to them, we'll say, well, it only applies in the most complex environments, and not all of mine are that complex, so it doesn't apply. The methodology has to apply, and you and your partner need to be able to show people how it applies in every environment, right? And then it has to be beyond conceptual. It has to be skills models that can be measured, and we have to then do the measuring, okay? So the next thing is we've got to get manager participation. Now, this is our model for performance. You've seen a couple today, right? It's real simple, though. Results are produced by the behaviors. Behaviors are enabled by skill and knowledge. Building the skill and knowledge requires commitment to doing that and the capacity to do it. When I say secure manager participation, I am not saying get them to attend training. I am saying the managers need to be an active participant in driving the learning. But in order to do that, they have to change some of their behavior, because managers are engaging with sellers. You don't have to get them to do that. They do it all day long. They'll keep on doing it. That's good. Unfortunately, most of their engagement is feedback. In other words, they'll see a gap in results and tell the seller they need to improve it. Well, you're not closing at a high enough rate, or you don't have enough new opportunities in your pipeline. You need to fix that, or you're not going to make your number. Or they'll say, you don't have enough, you're not closing at a high enough rate because you're not demonstrating our value versus the competition. You got to do that better. They'll focus on the behaviors. And by the way, it's not that feedback is bad. It's great if the seller knows what to do. The problem is most of the time they don't. And so what we have is a lot of managers giving a lot of sellers feedback that they can't go apply. What we need is managers who coach. Coaching covers the entire pyramid. In fact, coaching looks more like this. They sort of drive down this left side of the pyramid to identify the root cause of a gap, and then they assign some learning activity. In fact, I think we can do this. I'm not 100% sure, by the way, but I think you can raise your hands. If you can raise your hand, I would like to see how many of you have taken a golf, tennis, piano, any kind of a lesson. If you would raise your hand right quick, if you've taken any kind of a lesson from an instructor. Okay, awesome. All right, so if you've taken a lesson, you know what coaching is. I want you to think about, you took a golf lesson, you went there and said, I really want to get my handicap down. And the golf instructor is going to say, okay, great. What are you struggling with? I keep hooking the ball left. The instructor is going to say, great, swing the club. Let me see you swing. If at the end of your swing, you hook the ball left and the golf instructor says, yep, you're never going to be good if you keep doing that, you need to stop it. You're not going to pay for the lesson. You want it fixed. We need sales managers who can help fix the swing flaws in our sales execution, which means they have to be able to diagnose the root cause of the gaps that we see, not just reinforce that the gap exists. There is a model for this. Going to give you access to a white paper on this later, so don't worry if you don't copy it all down. It's called GUIDE. Stands for goal setting, uncovering gaps, identifying the root cause, defining learning activities or corrective actions, and then evaluating the impact. Now, here's the thing. We tend to talk about coaching as one thing. In fact, we've even seen a couple of poll questions about this. Are you coaching or training? Are you coaching or learning? That's not what it really looks like in practical application if it's done really, really well. In fact, it looks more like this. Coaching actually drives the learning. In fact, you can think of it like this. Think of goal setting as something that happens sort of once every quarter or year, right? And this is a very specific kind of conversation behind that. We don't have time to get into that today, but it'll be in that white paper. But this UIDE cycle that you see here, that cycle should happen every week or 2 weeks. And it is that cycle where I identify the root cause and I define some corrective action. I assign a learning activity that actually drives this learning cycle. And if we get managers good at that, it's going to happen every single week. And our people are going to be coached and they're going to be learning on a consistent basis. So what I'm suggesting you need to do before you launch your initiative is get your managers to commit to coaching, not just giving feedback, not just attending the training, but to coaching. Now, they're going to have some legitimate concerns about that. It's not an easy thing. So you need to let them know you'll have micro-learning content available. They can assign things out of it. You're going to help them with the diagnostics. You're going to make it easy for them. You're going to give them a matrix. You're going to give them tools and you're going to track it. Help them. This all doesn't have to be in place before you launch your initiative, but you need to have a plan so that you can go to them and say, you're the ones that are going to drive the learning. Through your coaching interactions, we're going to equip you to do that. Is everybody okay with that? All right, third thing, pretty quick one here. Make certain that you don't fall into the trap of having your program characterized as a flavor of the month. And it happens a lot in sales performance because companies like ours, we used to do the same thing. We want our brand on everything. Well, if my brand's on it, if the Axiom brand is on it, then your brand isn't on it. So here's what I'm suggesting. Make certain your content is branded with your own branding, your name, something that will resonate with your team. It's got your colors. It's brand right for you. And make sure that the examples that are in the learning are for your scenarios, not the company's standard scenarios. It's a little bit of time, but it's absolutely doable. And then the other thing I would really encourage people to do here, you heard earlier Richard talk about training as a service and a different business model. We have the same business model as they do. It is time for all of you to stop paying companies like ours for license rights to intellectual property that get you stuck with something that isn't working. Because if it's going to work, you need to embed the terminology in all your other stuff. In other words, we're going to teach your people about this model called peers, which is impact on the buyer's business. You're going to want to put that in your product training. You're going to want to put that in your collateral material. Well, if our learning and our tools aren't helping your people get more proficient in a year or two down the road, you either have to pay us a licensing fee to keep it in there, or you have to go to all your other stuff and rip it all out. That's not fair. You shouldn't have to do that. So beware of onerous IP restrictions that would keep you from integrating it into all your other things, or would cause you to have to keep paying for something that isn't having any impact down the road. And then the last of our 4 items, and I'm going to fly through this one because I want to make sure we leave time for some questions, is adopt sales fitness metrics. We need to be measuring things besides results. We need to be measuring execution, competency, learning. All right. So the 4 items then are select the right methodology, secure manager agreement, commitment to coach, brand and customize the content for your organization, and then adopt these sales fitness metrics. Now, could still fail to launch. And I don't know how many of you have seen the movie, but failure to launch doesn't mean you don't start. Just like in the movie, it didn't mean Matthew McConaughey's character didn't get older. He got older, but he didn't build momentum. You won't build momentum if you don't get seller buy-in. So that training program has to get them bought in. We have to have clear expectations of how much time they're expected to spend on this. Don't launch a program that requires them to spend 2 hours a week learning, because it's not sustainable. It won't become a habit to learn consistently. Launch something they can do forever. Make certain that you're measuring it, and make certain that leaders are engaging in it. All right, with that, next step's real simple. Do some integration stuff. Make sure you're being really transparent. Make sure your leaders are bought in. If you need help with that, one of the things that don't have on our resource slide that we can provide you is an ROI model that you can use. Make certain that you are rewarding, that you're recognizing people who are learning and getting better, people who are coaching, and make that very public, and do it as often as you possibly can. You will have people who won't comply, and you need to have a candid conversation internally about what you're going to do about that. With that, I want to open it up to Q&A. And as I do, these QR codes are available to allow you to download the selecting the right methodology, which is an actual webinar, but it'll go directly to the part that talks about that. Sales coaching white paper, which has more on the guide model and how to apply that in your business. We actually have a free book you can get Kindle or paperback that is the full sales transformation journey. It's written as a fable, so it's a really quick read. I think you enjoy that. And then we've got a paper to help you with what are those sales performance metrics that you want to measure, and how do you do that? And yes, I can show you the slide with the 4 items again. Here you go, slide 24. So select the right methodology. Don't give up, they're out there. Secure manager commitment to coaching. Brand and customize that content. Make sure the scenarios are scenarios that your people really face, and that it's branded with your terminology, that it has your logo, your color scheme, and then adopt the sales fitness metrics. In fact, I'll tell you, the biggest sale that we have in sales enablement to make and learning and development is to get the organization, the leadership, to start measuring the right sales fitness metrics and not just sales results. Because if they don't start measuring those things and they just measure results, then all of their messaging back to the organization won't reinforce learn, coach, execute. It'll reinforce, just make results happen magically. And that's what people will try to do. All right. With that, Dee, we've got some questions and we've got a little bit of time. So
Yes, we do have time. I'm going to start with a shorter question, because the first question that came in, I know you're going to love, and it's going to be a long answer.
All right.
This question is, what are some ways to reward if you don't have financial means for physical rewards?
That's a great question. And by the way, I love this because we tend to overcomplicate the rewards. Recognition, public recognition is extraordinarily useful. So that's at an organizational level. So what I would recommend you do is publish the results on a sort of leaderboard, a learning and development, an execution effectiveness leaderboard. And don't publish them the whole list, publish the top 3. If you publish the bottom, then people feel like you're beating on them. If you just publish the top, then people have something to aspire to. And then recognize that on all hands meetings, have senior leaders call people out for that. The other thing is, never underestimate the impact that an individual manager has with their people. Sometimes just saying, hey, I'm really proud of you, is actually all that is necessary in terms of reward. But if you read the habits books by Duhigg or James Clear, you'll find rewards are absolutely essential part. So make sure they're a really regular part of it. You do not have to spend money on it.
Okay, so this one you're going to love. Alexandra said that they've gotten some great book recommendations today. And do you have any books on sales training or sales methodologies that you've enjoyed?
So the free book
about your list.
the free book on the screen, The Sales Transformation Journey, is our book about selling. It is really about methodology, training, and transformation in the sales organization, not the specific methodology. There are good books about the methodologies. I have some issues with some, but I will give you a couple that I like. I like the Challenger book. You can't actually implement it, though, as a skill development initiative because it's very conceptual, I think, by the way. Lots of people try. And it's pretty complex. So, but it's a good book and it's a good read, by the way. So really good read. I think that there are some other books out there. I think that Daniel Pink's written some really good books about the topic, also about the skill. In a lot of cases, by the way, I don't recommend sales books because they're focused on the seller. What I'd suggest is books that help us understand the buyers. And one of the things that I'd suggest as a part of getting your sellers to really buy into any methodology is don't have them think like sellers, have them think like buyers for a little bit, and you'll be amazed at how much easier selling becomes. So one of the reasons I like the Challengers, I like a lot of the research that those guys do around buyer behavior too, and it's really helpful stuff. So I hope that helps. I'll try to come up with some more. The other three books I recommended, Daniel Bixby's book is good for training in general. James Clear and Charles Duhigg's books are really great, more broadly for change. Hope that helps. And you've got some other ones. Thank you for popping those in. Yeah, if you've got other ones that you all have enjoyed, throw them into the chat for people, please.
Yeah, and you can always come back to this recording or connect with Bob to get
Yeah,
more
absolutely.
information. So still on the book question, Sarah said, what is that book you mentioned for product training?
Yeah, it's by Daniel Bixby, and I think it's called Product Training for Product Experts. But it's definitely by Daniel Bixby, Bixby. So if you search by author, it is on Amazon.
Okay, so let's see, we have time for a couple more questions. How is it possible to customize and brand your content without delaying your launch?
Wonderful question. And it's possible if the provider that you work with has, not all have, but there are many who has designed their program so that it can be. So we do that, obviously. And the way we do it is we designed all of the learning so that we can break apart the examples from the concepts and the skills training, if you will, so that it can be done really easily. So in our case, it takes maximum of 30 days to do the original assessment, gather all the information, write all the scripts, and get them approved. So rarely is that a delay in the program, but it can be done even faster. So the way you avoid that is to make sure that you have that conversation. That's really what I want to encourage with that third point about brand and customize is have the conversation with any provider you're evaluating at the beginning. If they don't do it, it's hard or impossible. If they do it, then it's going to be pretty easy and it shouldn't delay your program.
And if you're doing it yourself, reach out to your marketing and design team if you have one.
Yes.
Or hire some freelancer.
Yeah, well, one thing I'd say, because this comes up a lot, is, people hear that and they say, well, maybe we should just do it ourselves. There's nothing wrong with actually leveraging companies like Imparta or Axiom, or there are lots of other good companies in the space. There's nothing wrong with that. Brooks is a sponsor here, so they're another good company, right? There's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong with it is if you don't get to have anything that you can retain if you eventually decide to part ways with the company. And so if you have the conversations up front, what you can do is you can start your initiative much more quickly by partnering with a company that has things to leverage than you can if you have to build it all from scratch. And that is about a year process. If you were going to do it, if you're going to find the best practices from your own team, you're going to create terms and definitions around those best practices, and that's going to take a long time.
And you're just reinventing the wheel because
you're going to
a lot of people who have already done this.
Yeah, exactly right.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Everybody, the big buzzword right now is AI. So how do you see AI affecting sales training in the future?
So there are a number of ways. Some of my views may be different than some other people's views. I don't think AI is going to eliminate the need for talented salespeople. But there are some challenges with developing sales talent that can be addressed with AI. So first thing is, it can have a huge positive impact if the methodology that you're leveraging is detailed enough. If it's not just conceptual and there are skills models associated with it, you can teach large language models the skills, and they can do things much more easily. Like you can tell them, hey, my salesperson's struggling with this, and they can figure out what the root cause is. And they, by the way, a large language model, an AI brain, if you will, knows everything, every learning the salesperson's taken, knows every opportunity the salesperson's working on, knows what they've struggled with, and can make recommendations about learning. So think of it as a coaching assistant. That's a really easy way for it to help. The other thing is, not through new applications so much from our perspective, but at the edge, using applications like Zoom, Slack, Teams, Outlook, and CRM. AI can look at what people are doing and surface the next best learning for them. So one of the things that you'll see in some of the books about habit is triggers need to happen in order for people to learn. And the 20% who will learn on their own, who will adopt the methodology because it's good and it's the right thing for them, they create their own. But we can use AI to create more intelligent triggers that will prompt learning. And then obviously it can glean insights that we just can't see because we can't see everything all at once.
Yes. It can search a lot faster than we can.
Yeah, much faster. And it sees all of it all the time at the same time.
All right. Well, Bob, thank you so much. It's always
My
a pleasure
pleasure.
to have you join us, and I hope we see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoyed it.
So thanks again to Bob and to all of our dynamic speakers today and our sponsors, Axiom Sales Kinetics, Domino, Imparta, Litmos, the Brooks Group, and WhatFix. Just as a reminder, all of today's sessions are pre-qualified for a credit hour by SHRM, HRCI, ISPI, and CPTM. And we'd love to meet all of you in person here in Raleigh, North Carolina at the 2024 Training Industry Conference and Expo. It's Training Industry's annual conference. We call it TICE. It's where learning leaders like you gather to forge new professional connections, learn from each other, and address your most pressing learning challenges. Re-energize your learning initiatives at TICE 2024. It's coming up in June. Early bird registration is now open through the end of March, and you can learn more at TICE2024.com. One last reminder, a survey will pop open in your browser upon exiting, and we'd greatly appreciate your feedback. And you will be getting an email with links and links to the on-demand sessions after this presentation. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to see you again at the next Training Industry Leader Talk. Thank you.